Yes. Thank God it's Friday. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. I'm gonna test the mic out real quick. Testing 3 4. Testing 3 4.
And in the depths of shadowed halls, I wandered all alone, casting whispers, blinding chains, demons of my own. I seek death flame, down spread on my frail soul. I once spin my mirror, haunted by my role. But in the echoes of my cries, just still I emerge, guiding me to where my true results are. Now I rise from the shadows, with wings of fire I ascend, free from the chains of sorrow, while this path of forever deepen. Shattered glass beneath my feet, scars I wear but dry. Stormy nights just turn to dawn, I wear truth as my guide. Anxiety's dissolved in the sun's golden rays. See my destiny through time and space. The fears that once consumed me now they take. For in my heart a new world is proclaimed. Now I rise from the shadows, with wings of fire I ascend, free from the chains of sorrow, on this path of forever depend. With symmetry I found the power, blessings granted by the hour. Together we will carve the way. Revolution calls and I'm not strong. Now I rise from the shadows, with wings of fire I ascend, free from the chains of sorrow, on this path of forever depend.
In base lab alone with my mind, stable theories they all refuse to find. I've been working on energy for a brand new day, but even in the crowd I'm still a castaway. Alienated from the A's of that adventure in disguise, ideas ahead of time dismissed with narrow eyes. Benefactor boy, dreaming about the world you can't deploy, changing the system but treated like a toy. Ideas misunderstood but brilliance is his boy. Benefactor boy, can't you hear his voice? Talking love 0 point, the points lost on them. Kevin structures crumbling from the same old Sam. They laugh like I'm crazy, but I see it all so clear. Exploited paper, unheard injustice, burning ears. Fighting for a change in this wasteland of noise. But they call me foolish, wanting shed boys. Benefactor boy, dreaming about the world he can't deploy. Changing the system, but treated like a toy. Ideas misunderstood, but brilliance is his boy. Benefactor boy, can't you hear his voice? Benefactor boy, keep fighting the fights, chasing revolutions in the darkest nights. A dreamer with vision beneath the laughter and noise. A future so bright, waiting for the right choice. Benefactor boy, dreaming about the world he can't deploy, changing the system but treated like a toy. Ideas misunderstood, but brilliance is his boy. Benefactor boy, can't you hear his voice?
Welcome, and welcome back to Beneficence TV Live. I'm your host, the Benefactor, and tonight we explore the unknown and the downright creepy. Welcome to Tales from the Rift. We have a special guest, Amaterasu, and she would like to share her unique experiences that include her father, who worked directly with T. Townsend Brown, a notorious fringe scientist who was developing anti-gravity technology. Before we begin, though, we have some very sad breaking news. Independent researchers have identified another scientist dead under mysterious circumstances, bringing the count to 11 so far. Now, these are experts in the fields of alternative energy and propulsion, free energy, electrogravitics, which includes like anti-gravity type technologies. They all hold high-level secrets. Now, breaking news focuses on a scientist named Amy Eskridge. The anti-gravity researcher found dead in 2022, just before publishing her breakthrough work. We're going to look at one of her final live stream conversations where she describes the pushback she faced trying to research and publish ideas in the areas of fringe science.
Group called Covenant Christian Academy. I was in public school in Huntsville through the first grade. We moved out to the country. I was in podunk fucking redneck middle of nowhere county school through the sixth grade. It was awful. I homeschooled. Jim Ashburn, the inventor of YBCO, was a homeschool dad from my cover group. Sean Bellina, MK Ultra motherfucker. His parents were both OBGYNs for MK Ultra, and he was raised on LSD from the age of 6. Was a CCA homeschool dad. Bill Dent, the best friend of Edward Teller, neutron bomb inventor, was a CCA homeschool dad. And like when we moved into our farm here in the middle of nowhere, Alabama, there was Mr. and Mrs. Dent next door, an elderly couple, grandma and grandpa. 25 years later, we meet Bill Dent. Those were his parents. His parents lived next door to us in the middle of fucking nowhere. And he's the inventor of the neutron bomb, the best friend of Ed Teller, and he's assigned to my team randomly. I didn't look for him. He joined my team randomly. Why did he live next door to me 25 years ago? That's weird. Like, all of these people homeschooled through the same group that I graduated from. I can learn a new field in 3 months. Name a field. I don't care what it is. Engineering, science, physics, material science, math, language. All you need to know is how to learn. So I want to do a Reddit AMA. I want to be like, I'm a time traveling, world saving, prophecy fulfilling bitch. Ask me anything. Ask me anything. I don't know. I've been in denial. I've been in denial until like, I don't know, a month ago. The Mansfield Amendment. Sorry, the Mansfield Amendment. Killed it. Go ahead. The Mansfield Amendment. Yeah. The Mansfield Amendment, around that time, they passed a law saying that the military cannot investigate anti-gravity, period. Charles Babbage and the Mansfield Amendment, it was made illegal for the military to investigate anti-gravity.
And Hal, you know who Hal really
How's a
is?
liar though?
Hal is the doctor from Stranger Things who like will torture little alien kids.
No, he is.
Get all the juice out of their brain. And you
Hal is
trust him?
actually extremely evil.
Yes.
No, I've met the man. He's extremely evil. He's very quiet. He listens more than he talks. But you can tease things out of him, but it's only what he wants you to tease out of him. He's like a nice old grandpa. Like you talk to him and he's like quiet and sweet and gentle, like a nice old grandpa. But he's evil as fuck. It's creepy. Lou is evil. Brandenburg is evil. Brandenburg is like super evil. I'm gonna bring George.
I believe she's talking about Lou Alessandro.
Lou said the same thing. Lou was like,
I'm not certain on that.
second season of the TTSA show on the History Channel, and we'll come do an episode about Huntsville. Like, I want to bring Tom DeLonge and Steve Justice and Hal and blah 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 people to your house. And he told me that the US government would give me a shit ton of money to keep me from selling it to China. And so I called him and I'm like, can you refer me to an active US Army general, please, to talk about this transaction? And he was like, radio silence. Like, I asked him to refer me to active military, and that killed the conversation. But yeah, they fuck with me. I'm tired of it. I'm in Huntsville, Alabama. I know I've said that several times. We're the Rocket City. We're the biggest deal you've never heard of. Von Braun was here and we won the space race. We developed the Saturn V here. We built the Saturn V here. We won the space race here in Alabama, whether you've heard of it or not. And I can tell you for a fact, so many prototypes. So many prototypes. Only prototype built like this in the world. You turn it on the first time, it works exactly like you thought it would the first time. Great data. You apply for more funding to test it more thoroughly, they cancel it. They cancel it. It goes to NASA divestment. It goes to the auction block. People bid on it. And literally scrap metal vendors win the bid and melt it down for scrap metal and sell it. We could be crazy.
So she's saying that there are devices out there that could provide alternatives to the energy and propulsion systems that we have today. And they get bought up and scrapped. She says they work and they get scrapped.
Crazy far. We could be on the moons of Jupiter. We could be exploring Pluto that isn't even a planet anymore if we had spent money differently. I can tell you the names of so many NASA scientists that are depressed and they want to kill themselves because they have built prototype after prototype after prototype in Huntsville, Alabama. First in the world, never before seen, worked the first time you turned it on exactly like you thought. And it was canceled and melted down for scrap metal. This time, they're waiting for someone to publish. They're ready. They're waiting. There are SSP motherfuckers that are fucking twiddling their thumbs. Like, is Amy not gonna publish soon? Gah, we've been influencing this bitch forever. Doesn't she know we want her to publish? Jesus. Like, there's multiple people doing that right now. And on the other side of the fence, there's multiple parties looking at each other like, didn't we tell this bitch 3 years ago that we kill people for this? Is she not listening? What is she doing? She's still doing it? What? We told her we were going to kill her 3 years ago. So I have these two different scenarios floating constantly in my life where I have people being like, do it. You're the one, do it. And then I have multiple people being like, they're going to kill you. Don't do it. They're going to kill you. I have like multiple of these whispers in my ears. I can't even describe it. It's crazy. And then I even have the people that are like, this happens too. They're like, you know, they kill people for this, right? And then they're like, because you're a young woman, they're going to rape you before they kill you too. And I have people digging through my panty drawer, breaking into my apartment, digging through my panty drawer so that I notice.
That's absolutely chilling. So, branching off into our main story, or our main segment, I want to give people a little bit of a background on T. Townsend Brown. For those who don't know about T. Townsend Brown, he was a pioneer of the 20th century of physics. As far back as the 1920s, he discovered what is now called the Byfield-Brown effect, the idea that high-voltage electricity can actually create thrust. He spent his life developing what's called electrogravitics, or anti gravity technology, and even demonstrated a disc shaped craft for the military that flew without any visible engines or signs of standard propulsion. So we're going to bring on Amaterasu Solar, our special guest, who has some experience with T. Townsend Brown and other interesting stories she'd like to share. How are you doing,
Oh,
Amaterasu? Can you hear
I'm
us?
doing well. Yep, I can hear you.
Awesome.
Where,
So,
where do you want me to start?
well, let's start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you
Well,
from and your upbringing?
okay. I was born in San Diego, California, and you know, for the most part, it was a pretty normal life. There were certain things that came along that were a bit off kilter, but once I got past the age of about 5, it was pretty normal, more or less. Uh, my father worked at Convair, which back then was one of the major aerospace, you know, companies in the country, and he was an electrical engineer, and his job was basically to work with Thomas Townsend Brown, and they developed some awesome stuff, and he'd come home and tell us all about what they were getting from his experiments and whatnot. And when on the nights, usually he was home late from work, and my mom would give me bedtime stories. But on the nights when he'd be home, and he'd come to do the bedtime story, I'd just beg him and beg him and beg him to tell me what his work would mean for us in the future. And he'd say, well, cities would float, cars would fly, and we would have all the energy we could use. And then I'd say, again, again, tell me again. he'd, we go through this about 15 times, and he'd finally say, "You sure you don't want me to read a story?" It's like, "No, I wanna hear about that." Says, "Well, I think you've heard enough for tonight." But, every time it was like I wanted to hear that litany. And, it was one night, I think I was about, oh, in the neighborhood of 3-ish, maybe a little younger. No, I was about 2.5 because we were still living in San Diego. We hadn't moved out to Long Island yet, and which I'll go into in a bit. Um, he came home one night late, woke me up, and told me he could not talk about his work anymore. And it's like, why, Dad? Why can't you talk about it? He's like, well, they want it secret for now. And I'm like, "No, no, really?" And he says, "Yeah, but don't worry, dear. It's only for a little while." I don't think he realized the impact of free energy on accounting for our energy added into a system. If he'd realized what that impact would be, which would be to basically obsolete the need for money, uh, he'd have known that it wasn't just for a little while, that they would keep this technology under wraps virtually forever if they could. So, but at
Right.
the time, and that was pretty much all of my experience with that, except for the one time when he came home and wanted to read me a bedtime story, and he said, and I said, "No, no, tell me about your work." And he says, "Sweetheart, I cannot talk about my work." And I just burst into tears and threw a fit. But that was the last we talked about it. And so, I've been carrying that with me for a while. That was, you know, I was born in 57, so that'll give you an idea about how old I am right now, somewhere in the neighborhood of 69. Anyway, so yeah, that was many, many years ago. And but I did get to meet Thomas Townsend Brown at least once. I don't really remember the other times except some vague memories, but it was the first time I met him. Uh, by that point, I was about 5, and he came to our house, and you know, Dad said, "Here's my boss, you know, T.T. Brown," and he reached out his hand to shake my hand, and I don't know if you were aware that he was missing a finger.
No, I was not aware of that.
Yes, he I forget now how he lost it, but he was missing a finger. He reached his hand out, and at 5, the whole concept of missing pieces of the body just had never even entered my universe. And I looked at that and just totally freaked out and embarrassed my mother and my father. I mean, and I wouldn't shake his hand, and I was like, no, no, no. So,
Well, yeah.
yeah, that was my first time meeting T.T. Brown. But
That's interesting. Well, how old did you say you were?
about 5 by that point.
Oh, yeah, you were just a kid, so
Oh,
it
yeah.
it, it
Well,
would
I
have
was
freaked any
never a
kid out.
baby goat. I was never a baby goat. Okay. I was a child at that time. And I actually have a reason why I am prickly about calling our children kids, because that practice came through Hollywood, and they sacrifice children in Hollywood like baby goats. And I know this because I watched a friend get sacrificed.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
yeah, that I've got uh, an article that I wrote on that too. I write a lot of articles, and it's called "Our Children Are Not Kids," and basically it describes that what would happen back about the time I was uh, 3-ish, two, about 3-ish in that neighborhood. I had my mother's sister, my aunt, uh, had married this man that I will not call my uncle, and I'll explain why in a moment. Uh, she and he had children, and their firstborn was about 9 months older than me, and their second child was about 2 months younger than my sister. And what this man would do would suggest that my cousin, who was my sister's age, come over to our place, and I go over to their place, and my sister and my cousin could play at our house, and I could play with my cousin, my roughly my age. Well, actually, what would happen would be that I would be taken to satanic rituals. And,
Oh wow.
uh
So
yeah.
are we talking about something? Now we're getting into the occult here, I believe. Are we talking about things in the realm of like Bohemian Grove, and those sorts of
No,
stories?
he was in the entertainment industry, and I don't know whether Bohemian Grove, but they took us to various people's houses. There were some rituals that were done in, like, parks at night. when there was basically no one around. Um, but
Interesting.
but
Well,
this one,
Bohemian Grove is just for your frame of reference, is a
oh, I'm
gathering
familiar.
of
I'm
elites. And
familiar with Bohemian
oh,
Grove.
okay, yeah, they supposedly worship a giant owl statue.
Yep, yep, yep.
Oh,
I've seen the images of it, and yeah, they had Alex Jones go in and uh,
right, and honestly,
videotape.
I think Alex Jones is completely nuts. But even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? So
Well,
I think he really did
I
stumble
don't
upon
think
something
he's
there.
I don't think he's nuts. I think he's controlled opposition. He's in
Oh,
on the play.
you
He's
think
in on the
he's
play too.
agitprop or something like that?
Yes, absolutely.
That makes more sense too. Like he's
Mhm.
playing a character.
Well, they all are, really. When you get right down to it, uh, the people we see on Plato's cave wall, i.e., our screens in the news, they're all characters that are delivering a performance. And I know a lot of people don't want to believe that, but that is the conclusion I have come to after many, many years of asking. My father taught me never to believe anything and rather to place probabilities of truth based on how well any given data explain what I see and be ready to adjust my probabilities if data come along that better explain what I see, and to never give 100% or 0% because there's always the possibility there are data I don't have. So,
Right. No, that's a good healthy mind frame to have, and I know just based on my research and looking into specific government programs like Project Mockingbird, for instance. They
mhm,
have people in every mainstream media outlet ready to kill stories, at will, to craft narratives, to
yep,
pressure people into as you said, performing a script, and to feed us a certain narrative, uh, and it's
absolutely.
yeah, and we really have to take everything with a grain of salt. Do your own research. If something doesn't smell right or doesn't pass the smell test, look it up yourself. It's quite obvious, because in just 30, 40 years ago, we had laws that prevented biased media. They would have to present both sides of the argument, and
Yes.
now it's
Well,
straight up propaganda.
I'm going to suggest that there are only 3 laws and that everything in the legal system is a legal aid. But they call them laws to get us to think we must obey. But then that's another story.
That's a
That's
story for
that's
another day.
that's more that I've been into, I tell you. But yeah, we watch a performance. All of the politicians, all of the, I mean, let's face it, things like Sandy Hook, there was just too much that said, no, that's fake.
Well, I,
I
I,
won't.
I kind of want to talk about the recent news, which is the Charlie Kirk assassination, real quick, because
Oh,
there's some
no.
really suspicious things coming up on that front. Um,
No, he was, I mean, there was never any funeral. There was, you know,
well, I
nothing
mean, when you see
after the
them
event.
repave, yeah, when you see them repave the site that he got assassinated on, the pavement within days of the assassination,
Yeah.
something's not right because that's evidence.
Well, he did not get assassinated, and they were hiding the fact that it was all BS. Okay. What they do with these stories is the character gets killed in the script. The actor exits the stage. Okay. No, I've got so many links to things that show that there is no way that that could have been real. It
And
was
we have somebody. We also have an anonymous person that just released a video claiming to be an informant from Iran saying that he was actually killed with a microphone. So there's a lot of different things going around, but I
Well,
think going back to the core suspicions is there's a lot of things don't add up.
yep,
They covered up the crime scene pretty well, pretty
yep.
fast right after the incident, and just all the nonsense afterwards with Erica Kirk taking over the business right away, and
Yeah,
yeah,
she didn't. I never saw her looking bereaved. You know, not
yeah,
really.
yeah.
You know, it's
See,
like okay,
that was very concerning. But I think we kind of got off track. You were talking about the satanic rituals that
oh
you
yes,
were. Yeah, and I'm
yes.
sorry, I kind of sidetracked you a little bit
Oh,
on
that's
that.
okay. That's okay. The this man who married my mother's sister, which is what I call him, would take me to these rituals, and I don't remember all of them. And in fact, I suspect there were a number that I don't recollect at all. But there were a couple, one which I was placed on the altar and given sexual arousing, touching, and whatnot.
Yeah, so let's just say use the word abused,
Okay,
just to keep
I was,
it PG. Yeah,
yeah, I was
it's just
abused,
because YouTube is very
prickly. I
aggressive
know.
with certain words. Yeah, so we got to just be careful around those subjects.
Okay, yes, I was abused, and the other one that I have the greatest recollection and actually quite a clear memory of is I had a friend that was sort of my mentor at these rituals. She'd tell me what to expect and what to do and, that sort of thing. She was like a year older than I was. And she obviously had done a lot of these things. And I was taken to this ritual down. I could probably, if I ever got in that area, I could probably find where it was, unless they raised the building. I have no idea. But, uh, we went in and they had us changing into these robes and these really uncomfortable masks. And while we were doing that, this lady came down some steps at the back of the room and called my friend over to her saying that they had something special for her that night. And I remember, ironically, it turns out that I was very envious because I wanted to be the special one. Well, we she left with this woman and we went, eventually we went up these stairs into this room and they had the altar all set up and I was never much into the performances that they did, not at that age, like I said I was about 5 and they started doing their, religious stuff that I paid no attention, and at that age, I was really good at daydreaming. So I went off in my own head, and then suddenly the air of the room shifted, and I looked up, and I saw this child being escorted with 2 people, one on either side of the child, in also dressed in this robe and mask, and they lifted this child up onto the altar and did some more chanting and yada yada. And I went off into my head. And then all of a sudden, I hear this blood curdling scream. And I look up, and it's the mother of my friend. And I look over at the altar, and they had lifted the mask, and the child was my friend on the altar. And this mother turned to the children, because there were a number of us children that were standing there, about, I don't know, a dozen, give or take. And she said, "It was supposed to be one of you," and started lunging for us. And several people grabbed her and held her back. And I realized that, my friend had not moved. She was up there on the altar and she had not even twitched. And I'm starting to wonder what's going on. And uh, all of a sudden, there's this pounding on the door, a door from downstairs somewhere. And all of a sudden, they're like, oh my God, get the kids out of here. You know, I mean, they use the word kids. And, get them out, get them out. And so uh, they hustled us down the stairs, and I kept asking about my friend. And this woman who kind of took charge of me had me get dressed. And, I was about to put my shoes on, and she grabbed my hands and said, you can do that later. And yanked me along back up the stairs that we had come down when we entered this area where we changed into the robes. And, I there was broken glass and such, and I was trying to walk on this, and I kept trying to put my shoes on. She finally grabbed my hand and pulled me all the way up to the the stairs to the street, and there was a car waiting, and she shoved me in and came in after me, and there was this huge fat dude that was on the other end of the seat, so I'm like scrunched between this fat dude and this woman. And I keep asking about my friend and asking about my friend. We take off, and there's a guy in the front seat. Not, there's the driver and then a guy in the passenger seat in the front. And finally, he turns around to me and says, "She's dead." And I just sat
Oh
there
my
for a moment
God.
and then just burst into tears. And the woman beside me leaned forward and hissed, "Why did you tell her?" And he said, "She has to know." And I can't stop crying. I mean, I'm just devastated. And he finally, after a long, a fair length of time of me just in hysterics, turned to me and said, "Do you like milkshakes?" Well, at that age, that was probably the thing I lived for, if you know what I mean. So
Right,
I
right.
loved milkshakes,
Well, every
and
yeah, every kid's gonna love a milkshake.
and I stopped every child, get it right. Uh, I stopped long enough to nod, and he said, "I tell you what, if you stop crying, I will buy you a milkshake." Well, I managed to get more or less control over myself. And we went to, I think it was a Sambo's. They were fairly popular in San Diego back then. And we went in and we were seated, and he kept his promise. I got a milkshake. And then the man who married my mother's sister came in and explained that it was the police who had heard this woman, the mother, scream and called the police to check out what was going on. And he had explained to the policeman that they were practicing a play and thought that they had a place where they wouldn't interrupt anybody with the script. And
Oh, so they were all in on it.
oh yeah, everybody, all the adults knew what was going on except the the mother of the
Oh, except
child.
the
She was
the
not
mother. Oh, oh,
Yeah, she had
interesting.
not been informed that it would be her child.
Wow, and that's
Anyway,
why she probably got aggressive towards the other
yeah. Oh,
children.
yeah. Oh,
When
yeah, that's why
wow,
she went
that's
after her.
absolutely tragic. I
And,
can't believe you went. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, that's okay. So, he came in and explained all that, that how it went down, and eventually we left and back to his place, and I'm trying not to just break into tears, and he told me, "You better shut up because I don't want you to wake up your cousin." Well, I managed to get to sleep, got up in the morning, and he took me back home, and I was holding it back through the whole experience. We get home and we're walking up to the house, and my mom opens the door because she knew we were there. She opens the door, and I ran to my mother, flung my arms around her legs, sobbing and sobbing, saying, "She's dead. She's dead." And my mom looks up to him like, "What's this all about?" And he tells my mother, "Oh, she just had a really bad nightmare."
Wow. And
And
just
I'm
wow.
like, no, it was real. It was real. And so they talked
And that
back
was
and
your
forth.
your mother's sister's husband?
Yes,
Wow. And
my
where
aunt.
was your father at this point?
He was at work, I think. I
Oh,
don't.
you don't recall your parents directly involved in this at
Oh,
all?
no, no, no. They were not involved with that.
Oh my
No,
God. So
the
it
the man
was
who married my mother's sister made up an excuse for me to come over so he could take me to these rituals.
wow.
No,
And
my
and
parents
could
did
you
not know.
could you make out anybody else? I know you said they were in masks and robes, but was there anybody there that you could identify other than, you know, your mother's sister's husband?
Well, there were people that I might have recognized from other rituals, and certainly my friend who was murdered. Uh,
Right, right.
I knew her, and but none of the other people that were involved there were people that made any kind of major impression on me. No,
So did you ever
I
find out what religion they were practicing or what they were?
well, I would have to give the probability it had some satanic elements. I I I wouldn't know for absolute sure, but like I said, I'm pretty sure these were satanic rituals that we were
Some
that
kind
I
of
was being
sect of
dragged to.
Satanism. Yeah, because there's different, there's different sects of religions and
True.
not, but I know there's a specific section of Satanists who don't even practice religion. They just use it as like a parody for religion, and they're really
Yeah, they're atheists, basically.
atheists. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I don't want to confuse the two, but
Yeah, I
yeah.
really don't know. I don't, I was way too young to know what data to collect. It's
Right.
like
No,
I
it's
just
that's a tragic experience for a child to go through, and I think it's remarkably brave that you're at a point where you can share that with
well,
everybody.
I completely forgot because what happened was after I don't know, I was like an hour or so after he left, and my mom's like, "It was just a dream. It was just a dream." It's like, "No, mom, it was real." And I'm sobbing, and finally she said, "Well, just forget about it, okay?" And she got up and left me. And I managed to forget. And it wasn't until I was about, I don't know, 35, thereabouts, in that neighborhood. I was always fascinated with Satanism, but did not know why. I didn't want to have anything to do with it, but I wanted to grasp what was going on.
Right. There was
So
that
I
seed
studied it
planted
as
in
I
your head.
studied it as much as I could, and I came upon a statement that said sometimes they will sacrifice a child of one of the members without telling the parent or parents. And
You
suddenly, click, and the memory started with the scream, you know?
Oh,
And
so
then,
you repressed the memory and it came flooding back.
yes, and it was so weird. There's no real way to describe it because it came back in both directions from that scream. I remembered more and more of what happened before and more of what happened afterwards, and then it all just clicked. And I went, wow. Yeah,
Right.
I was flabbergasted. And, it took me a little while to process it, but not all that long because I've had in my life a lot of stuff that, well, anyway.
Well, no, it's
So yeah.
interesting because I myself have had repressed memories from childhood trauma. Not on the level of your experience, but
Right.
obviously, you know, uh, children repress memories that are traumatic, and the way they come back is very unusual sometimes. Like you said, like it comes flooding back, but you remember bits and pieces more, and it could be anything, that triggers it really. And the thing is, with traumatic experiences and repressed memories, at least from my experience, like you don't know how many you have, that you've repressed. There's really
There's
no way of
well,
knowing.
like I said, I've got a lot of I know that I went because what happened when I was 16, uh, I was in junior theater, which is what the man who married my mother's sister was head of in San Diego. And one day he called me into his office and then said, "Let's go for a walk." And he took me out into Balboa Park, which is where, the setup was for junior theater. And we started walking. And he started asking me, "Do you remember?" And then I wish I could he said, "Do you remember being?" And he listed a number of places. And I'm like, "No, no, no, no." you know, like close to a dozen places before I went, "What's this about?" And he said, "Oh, nothing," turned on his heel and walked off and left me. So I know that there
Interesting.
were he was verifying that I didn't remember what had happened back
Right.
when
It
I
seemed like he was testing you without trying to
Yeah,
give anything away.
exactly. And I really wish I could remember where he brought up, but I wasn't paying that much attention to it. I just was like, "No, I don't remember that. No, no." And at that point I didn't because I didn't have the full memory of that one experience or any of the others. Uh I didn't associate him with anything like that. So, it didn't register that this might be some important thing, but it was really weird that he would ask me all these, "Do you remember this being there, here, wherever?" And then just walk off and leave me like that when I asked what it was all about. I thought that is very weird. But, once I had that memory come back of what happened to my friend, I grasped why he was asking all that. I'm like, "Okay, yeah." But,
Wow. I'll be honest. A lot of this stuff regarding the occult, if you would have asked me my opinion like 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I would have been very, very skeptical. But, with the new release of the, Epstein files and the Epstein class, and all the disturbing emails that have come to light regarding,
yeah.
potential, cannibalism and stuff,
Oh,
and
yeah.
how he ordered sulfuric acid in barrels and to his private, it's all very suspicious. And
Yep.
I'm starting to wonder, like with all these people coming out with experiences like this, not just you, but other people. Like there was this lady who was screaming. I think she was speaking a different language, maybe Spanish or
Mhm.
something, but she was screaming. Yeah, they're eating people. They're eating people, and she was a survivor of that trafficking network from the Epstein
Yeah,
class. So,
I
uh,
wouldn't be surprised, I tell you.
yeah,
And
and they
to be very
well,
honest, I don't even know that I haven't eaten like that. I
I mean,
wouldn't be
how
surprised.
can any of us be sure if we're not producing our own, like we're not processing our own meat? You know what I mean? Like at a
True.
certain point, there are horror stories that I've heard, people getting rid of, remains and stuff and exposing that to the public.
Yes, I
But
have years I came across some of that years ago where they were saying that the meat processing plant, some kind of disturbing percentage, like 5% was human meat in the ground
yeah,
beef.
some disturbing statistic, like 5%. Yeah, like I read the same
And
thing.
and it's
I'm
like,
like, what?
oh, creepy.
Yeah,
But
that's not acceptable. 0% is the acceptable answer.
exactly, exactly. It is, and it's unethical to lie,
Yeah.
and that is a lie by omission. Here, we're
No,
giving
that's
you
that's
some
a
food.
good point because a lot of people who do lie don't cite the lie by omission, which is holding back. It's just much as
Yeah,
lying as giving information. So absolutely.
absolutely. If you don't tell somebody that you're feeding them something that is like the flesh of a human, you are unethical.
I mean, and
Fact.
we've seen how unethical these corporations have become with the food that we're dealing with now. Like even
Oh
the
yeah.
fresh produce are sprayed with chemicals that make them last longer in the a
Oh, I
supply line.
know. I know. I have problems because I think part of the reason I'm struggling right now is because I was eating the quote organic unquote blueberries from this market, and I started noticing that they didn't go bad in the refrigerator even if they'd sit there for days and days and days, and I'm like, and then
Wow.
I learned not a peel. A peel is something that they use to distract us from what they were spraying on the organic.
Right. And if it's not gonna if it's not gonna degrade like naturally, how is it gonna digest in your system?
Yeah. So, I've stopped eating anything that I can't determine
No,
has been.
it's a safe route to go nowadays, and I know my
Yes.
buddy Mike does also talks about this is eating healthy and avoiding some of like I try to cook fresh meals for myself as much as possible and avoid some of those things. But like you said, the blueberries are sprayed with something or they got some kind of chemical that didn't agree with you, and they probably don't break down well in the digestive system for and a lot of these products like you said they're just holding on the shelf. They're spraying them with chemicals or injecting them with chemicals so they can sit on the shelf longer,
Yep.
and it's just like even the restaurants nowadays, the food quality has gone down because they're all getting their food from the same restaurant supplier, Cisco, and I think
Yep.
there's maybe one or two suppliers around the entire country, and I'm like, wow, like
Yeah, I know
we don't really have that
it's
many options.
it's very sad. It's very sad. I don't know if what you can do as far as showing some of my articles, but I've got a lot of articles and many of them deal with free energy and why it means that we don't need money. And a lot of articles, like my latest, is is called, let's see, it's called The Profit Driven Paharma Medikill Industry. And it's
Yeah,
all
any
about it's all about the fact that, when I was young, my doctor spent time with me, talked to me, discussed things with me, cared. I even had one doctor that in the middle of the night, I had an accident, and I guess the hospital called him to let him know that I was in an accident. He showed up at the emergency room because he cared. Anymore, doctors are doctors to get rich. They don't
right.
care. They are cremating the care.
So there's a I was
That
gonna say any documents or anything that you'd like to share regarding your social media. If you have any plugs or anything like that, feel free to
well,
post them in the chat and in the StreamYard, and I'll put them on the live stream.
okay, well, I've already dropped a couple. I haven't talked about the Montauk Project Reject article yet, but the fact that I had an experience with Montauk. But yeah, I've been dropping stuff in the chat. Uh,
Yes, I'm gonna copy those over right now. Thank you.
okay, let me see. I've got like almost 300 articles, so I don't think I want to give everything. Uh,
No, just what you feel comfortable sharing. I know you said you had some
oh,
articles on free energy, and that's kind of like our realm here on this channel.
yeah.
We're gonna be doing some more streaming on that subject in a little bit as well.
Okay, here is my article. I also have a video, but you can find it attached to the article because it's basically I just typed up what I said in the video, but it's called Electrogravitics, My Knowledge of Free Energy. And let me put one more in here. Uh, yeah. Okay. I'm also in I don't know if this is problematic, but I'm also an anarchist.
No,
I'm
that's fine. I'm a socialist and a libertarian socialist. So I mean, we welcome all political ideologies or political economic ideologies. So, um,
well,
it's different perspectives on the same issues in my opinion. But no, I have no problem that you're an anarchist. I myself am not an anarchist, but I can see the appeal definitely when government is kind of been captured by the capitalist class, the business owners, and like I do wish that we had a society that didn't have a monetary system. Like you said, we don't need money, we don't need class
no,
systems, and we don't need government, we don't need a state.
true. That
So I,
that's
I
what
agree with
my
all that.
my ethical anarchy. We need the three laws of ethics. We do not need the legal system. And well, when you have the time you can peruse my work,
Yes,
find out.
it's gonna take me a few minutes to copy these, so I might just
Oh, no rush. No rush.
yeah, I'll do it probably. I don't know how long you have, but if we take an intermission, I'll definitely be able to get them all copied over then.
Well, I am willing to stay as long as you think I'm worthy of listening to.
No, I mean, you
Um,
got some really great articles here, and I mean, I'd like to ask you more about your experience with, researching free energy and electrogravitics, because that's specifically, I work in alternative energy, And the propulsion side I haven't really explored, other than maybe a couple of ideas I have with my own systems. But I mostly work with trying to just, generate energy in systems efficiently and recycle energy that's wasted in most systems. I
Right.
don't really try to encapsulate what I do as free energy because it's gotten a bad rap, and
Right.
I try to explain things in a more realistic way, and honestly, all free energy is a mutual exchange of energy from the vacuum, and it's going on all the time at a subatomic level.
Yeah.
So,
I call it the ether.
right, the luminiferous aether,
AETH.
yes,
Yes.
the ether.
Um, yeah, I highly recommend Dr. Paul A. Laviolette. I was very sad when he passed. He and I had some discussions, and his work, his counter theory to the Einsteinian bunk, which was pushed on us because it did not predict the energy in the ether, called
Yeah, I kind of
subquantum.
sidestepped the aether. Sorry.
Yeah, they and they when they did the Michelson-Morley experiment, they misrepresented it because
Oh, I believe that.
what they said was it proved that there was no ether. And what it proved was that there was no stationary ether, which is true.
Yes,
Ether
and
is
and
not
and they tested
stationary.
one. They tested one theory, and there are many different theories of the aether
Yep.
that they. And to be honest, I don't know if this experiment panned out to be fully valid or not, but they did have a replication of the Michelson-Morley experiment on, I believe it was APEC, Alternative Propulsion and Energy Conference. And
Mhm.
what they did was they found a drift pattern of the aether, but they changed the axis of the test. So either they maybe they were testing on the wrong axis accidentally or intentionally. Either way, if you wanted to, like disprove the aether, that seems like a something that you could kind of pass off, in my opinion, if somebody didn't
Right.
know from an outsider's perspective, outside of the testing, that was an important variable. So I don't know. I don't know. It's all
Well,
very suspicious, though.
I do know that uh Laviolette's uh counter theory to the Einsteinian stuff, uh subquantum kinetics, when he first saw that it predicted the energy in the ether, he thought he'd made a mistake. And he started combing over his work, trying to figure out where he made his goof. And it wasn't a real long time, but it was long enough that he was getting frustrated. But he encountered the work of, guess who? T. Townsend Brown. And he went, oh, that's exactly what it predicts. The energy,
Wow.
the drawing the energy from the ether. You can draw energy from the ether. And, watching this whole performance on this literal world stage of oil and the wars that are going on because of oil. And I sit there going, they know they have free energy. They're hiding it from us. All this is unnecessary. But if they told us that, their whole script would go down the toilet.
Oh
And
yeah, there have been
they're
so many inventors that I've looked into personally, and just with the rodent coil, I've been able to verify every single claim that most of these inventors had about the rodent coil that all of a sudden went dark. So,
Mhm.
like that, it in of itself opened my eyes to be like, there's something here that is really not being talked about. And even on we were talking about mainstream media, like shows like the Mythbusters are very disappointing because they
Yes.
obviously did a hack job on, say, the Bedini motor, which I'm running right now and it's working perfectly fine, charging a battery with another battery. So uh,
Yes.
it, it's kind of frustrating, I sent my research out to a bunch of people in the mainstream, and most people just dismissed it. So it's
Yep.
unfortunate.
Well, a lot of people will dismiss it because their work and, as we have seen lately, even their lives are at stake. So they will just gloss it over and like, no, never bring that up again. you know, like, yeah, they are very, very adamant in this universe here that we find ourselves in hiding that. And as I said, if free energy means, the foundational function of money is to make sure that we're adding our fair share of energy. That's a foundational function. That's why it arose to begin with. When communities got big enough that everybody didn't know everybody else, they didn't want people that would come along and just take and put nothing into the community. So they started looking for proof that you added your energy to get the product of their energy, right? And so
So
your
like
account.
a representation almost of
Well, yeah,
yeah,
I
your
work
contributions.
raising these hens, and I've got all these eggs, and you grew all those potatoes, and I'll give you my potatoes as proof that I did work if you give me your potatoes. I mean, I'll give my eggs, you give me your potatoes. Okay. So the trade and barter started the money, and of course, trade and barter are problematic at a certain level, where you
Yeah,
need you need that.
Plato and Aristotle didn't like markets. And I have problems with markets too. Like in certain aspects when you're studying, the market, say from a philosophical standpoint. I've seen it with my own eyes. My grandfather taking me to the flea market, and essentially you have two people haggling and trying to get screw the other person, and it's not a
Right,
mutual beneficial exchange like you see. Like before money, communities would mostly they wouldn't trade. They would get together in communal events. We call them
right,
as festivals, and they would exchange. Oh, I have a surplus of this, vegetable, and this person
right.
needs a little potatoes, and they would just give it to them. It was
Yep.
just like a beneficial
Yeah.
exchange where everybody took care of each other. It wasn't like, oh, I got 5 eggs and you got 3 carrots, but those carrots look dirty. Like you'll get 4 eggs for those carrots because they look dirty. That's none of that BS.
Right, right, right. Well, the thing is that eventually, it got to the point where, people would say, I need X, but they don't need my Y, so I can't have their X. So they started up with representational things. Everything beyond the trade and barter is representational of the energy we add. They started
Right.
using shells and beads. They even used sticks notched and split to account for the, you know, what we owned and added our energy to. And then, of
Right,
course, the
exactly. And
metals.
that's interesting you say that because I did an analysis that's connecting, or I did an analysis that I used an analogy where the production process is akin to a closed circuit where the amount of energy you put in is what you get out. You're not going to get out more than you put in the production system.
Right.
So we have these business owners who are extracting the wealth from the lower classes, but
Mhm.
they're not actually, you get what you put in. You have the embodied labor and living labor, and then that produces the value, the product. So but I just wanted to say that was interesting, that because I felt the same way. Like the energy you put into labor and what you're doing, contributing to the means of production in your community, it really is transferred and accounted for. And I think the breakdown here is when it started becoming represented by, like what you said, money. Um,
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Okay, in today's world, we take a look around and look at all of the jobs that people are inputting their energy for the energy accounting tokens they're getting for it. And 80% of them and more are just pushing money around.
yes,
Cashiers,
yes.
sales, uh, accounting, um, debt collecting, tax collecting,
Insurance
you know,
companies that don't add
insurance.
any quality to your
Yes,
service. They just
insurance.
extract. Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
so we've got 80% of us that if we got rid of money could, in theory, be doing good things to help out. And we obviously don't need everybody. If we did, they would be doing those things. They wouldn't, the necessary work. And on top of that, we are now automating the necessary work, which means that maybe 5 to 10% of us are required for the creative necessary work.
Well,
Okay, so we
Gene.
have all, I'm sorry?
Oh no, I was gonna say Gene Roddenberry. He saw the future, and I think that's
Yes.
what a lot of the people at the top who control the petrodollar system. That's what they fear is the Gene Roddenberry Star Trek-esque future, where it's a true communist society, not the fake communism
Well,
you see in
I
Russia, but
wouldn't,
a moneyless society, a society where there's no class structure, and people are
yeah,
free to do what their skills
or
to free to
or
hone
or
their
nothing
skills.
at all. Obviously, we don't need everybody, but what I see, I don't like communism. I'm an abundancist. I would put abundancism uh as
Oh,
the
could you,
term.
because I'm not familiar with that term. Could you explain like what that is, real briefly?
Uh yeah, hold on. I'm trying to find my article on it so I can drop that too.
No, that's fine. Go ahead. Check in
Okay.
with chat. Hey, what's going on,
Okay.
Mike?
Here's one. I've got a bunch of them, but this one will get you started. Anyway, abundancism is the idea that unlike back in the day when we were trading and bartering in a scarcity environment, we now live in a very abundant, we have access to the abundance. And the only thing that's keeping us from the abundance is money. We don't have it, we can't buy it, you know?
And I do agree. And there is a warning in the uh, old literatures and religious texts that money is the root of all evil. And I do agree
Well,
that is the main problem. But
money is not the root of all evil. The love of money, i.e., power over others,
okay, that's
is
the
the
distinction is
root
important. No, I see that.
of
Okay.
all evil, i.e., unethical behavior choices.
That's no, that's an important distinction. I would agree. So that is a major concern because, like you said, it's stopping us from progressing from abundance. And in a lot of ways, I agree with you because there's more and more science coming out regarding transmutation of elements. And free
Yep.
energy research that just say we don't have to be in scarcity anymore. We don't have
No,
to be
no,
scarce of any resources. Russia is
technically,
Yeah, Russia
yeah,
has been manufacturing gold and silver with transmutation, probably transmutation processes similar to what John Hutchison was doing, and
yes,
it's not like it's not fringe anymore because we do have proof regarding the transmutation of elements and in specifically the thunderstorm generator, for instance, that is gone
correct.
semi-mainstream. So
Yep. Yeah, no, there is really technically we're already in abundance because if you go to the stores, well, at least before this stupid play on the stage doing the war segment, uh, where all of a sudden the shelves are diminishing in products. But up until that happened, you could go into any store and see tons of stuff, tons of stuff.
Right, right.
And
Or we're slowly becoming getting to a point where, even if we have tons of stuff in the grocery store, people just can't afford it, so it's just going to go to waste.
exactly, that's the thing. Well, and that's why they're spraying their products with crap to keep them from going bad, because that way they can keep them on the shelves longer and hope that people will buy them. Yeah, it's sad. It's very sad. But yeah, if
Right.
we
And
all could we all could afford everything that we wanted, there'd be still be plenty for us.
right.
Okay? So, we're already post scarcity, and I don't use that with any political attachment whatsoever. Uh and money is the barrier that keeps us from it, that keeps most people in poverty, and allows the psychopaths amongst us to manipulate us and put on this play for us and tell us we're at war and the universe is falling apart, and put the character Donald J. Trump on. I mean, there, how can anyone take that seriously? I don't know. I mean, that man
I
is so clearly
He's a
a
clown. He's a
a
clown.
character. He's a
Yeah,
character on the
a
stage.
character. But
He's
I think I would have to also agree with you on that our system, right? The system of capitalism, money is basically God in the system, right? It is
Yes.
worshipped, it is loved, and my main beef with this current system is in a state of scarcity. Say we do have a state of scarcity, which happens from time to time. Say in a specific thing like milk, in the system that we have, the milk price is going to rise past the point where the family of five who is struggling to pay grocery bills can't afford the milk, but the rich person can afford it for his cat. Not that I have anything
Yes.
against feeding your cat, but you'd want to feed the community's children over
Yeah.
the pets, the rich person's pets. Like the priorities are just not there.
The clue that money promotes the psychopathic is the
Yes,
fact
yes, and
that
that is
they
also true.
have there are quadrillionaires that we do not see on the stage. They're the ones writing the scripts, casting the actors, and directing from the wings. And I think they're Roman. I will give the highest probability to Roman. With names like Orsini. Anyway, the they uh have enough wealth that they could feed, clothe, and house every single one of us on this planet 10 times over. Do they do any of that? No. They keep us struggling and in poverty and miserable and get their psychopathic selves off on it. You know?
Yeah, and I think we're starting to see that their game is coming to an end too, because the internal contradictions of our economic system are coming to a collapse, and they just
Well,
can't sustain itself anymore like this.
they are doing it deliberately, because you see, the ones with all of the precious metals are them. I mean, okay, I won't say all, uh, virtually all. I told somebody, I thought it was funny. I told somebody that they had virtually all of the precious metals. So if we go off the fiat system, they'll still be in control. And he said, "No, they don't. I've got $500,000 worth." And I'm like, You think that's a drop? I mean, that isn't even a drop in the bucket of the the, the trillions and trillions that they own.
Right, and going back to transmutating elements, if they do have that technology, which
Yes, they
probably
do.
do, they can just make as much as they want, like you said, just accumulate, like
Yep.
all the, and that's what transmutation. We've seen it produce precious metals like gold and silver.
Yep.
So, and out of like a copper bar. Very, very fascinating, like stuff that Sir Isaac Newton was working on. A lot of people don't know that Isaac Newton was mostly an alchemist before,
Yes, it was.
he studied gravity, but
Yep. He was definitely an alchemist, amongst other things. But they only heralded him for the scientific stuff that he did.
right, a lot of that
Anyway,
stuff gets brushed under the rug. You don't learn you
yep.
learn about Isaac Newton in school, but I never was taught that he was an alchemist until I did my own research. And that,
Yep.
that was mostly what he was focused on is trying to turn lead into gold and other precious metals. So
Yep.
it's fascinating because we do have a science now and an understanding of how that is actually possible with structured plasma. And I know, going back to Dr.
Hmm.
Greer's movie, I don't know if you've ever seen Dr. Greer's recent documentary called
No, I tend to avoid Greer. I will be honest. I used to be a big
I
fan of his, but then he started showing signs of being controlled opposition,
I
and
would
I went,
agree. I would completely agree, but his documentary specifically on free energy research, the Lost Century,
mm-hmm.
it kind of focuses on his history and giving whistleblowers a platform. And there's a lot of interesting information that I took from that documentary that we can link to actual science now from the thunderstorm generator, including an area of science that was, said to be promising for being a gateway to zero point energy, which is, plasma physics. And that we know to be true now. So I just
Right.
thought that was really interesting that all the dots are connecting. And if you've, done any kind of research into this independently outside of, like watching a couple of YouTube videos, you will go down this rabbit hole that you'll find like there's really, like this deep, dark history of inventors just going silent or
Oh
mysteriously
yeah.
disappearing.
Yep.
And it's
But
not one or two, it's like hundreds.
yeah, the thing is that if you file for a patent and it's something they don't want humanity to have, they will swoop in and handle things. Either they will get you to sign an NDA and give you zillions of dollars, and then you go off and keep your mouth shut. And if
I've
you
seen that
refuse,
happen.
and if you refuse to sell, well, let's see. First, they might try uh blackmail, get you into a situation where it's less than optimal to get people, for people to know about. Oh, they'll try that. If that fails, they'll start threatening you and your loved ones. And if that fails, you are going to not see the future. You know, they will take you out. And that's the way it goes. That's why I keep telling people, if I wish I had the wherewithal. I really do. I would be building free energy things everywhere if I could. But my situation is pretty rough right now, being targeted and elderly and destitute and homeless. You know,
Right, that's
I'm I'm grateful for a
that's a lot to
friend
deal with.
who lets me shelter on his floor and use his net. That's the only way I get on the net and have a roof over my head. Beyond that, I've got nothing. But I keep telling people, if you're going to do free energy, share your successes freely and widely. And do not worry about patents, because first of all, you stand a much better chance of not being handled. And second of all, in the end, we all will be vastly richer. And did you know, I don't know if you know this, but technically speaking, every one of us that was born on this planet, or I guess in it if there's anybody inside, but maybe, I don't know. Anyway, if you're born here, you own a share of the wealth. N- No one has more interest in the wealth than any other. But what these psychopaths did is they started this back in the 1600s with trusts. They started with the uh, oh, what's it called? I I'm getting old. I'm sorry. Um,
No, it's okay. Back in the feudalist days.
yeah, they started in with trusts, and they first of all, it started with the Catholic Church, okay, and they used some excuse, and as time went on, they added to it, and basically what they wound up doing is creating the Sestui KB trusts, which is if you're living, you are incompetent, so your wealth goes into these trusts. And I just dropped a link to my article called Trusts: The Big Heist Against Humanity, that will go into the details. So technically, every one of us is at least a multimillionaire, at least, maybe more, maybe a billionaire. But, you remember Rockefeller said something about own nothing, control everything. That's
Yep.
exactly
And
what
that's where
that's
we're
what
yeah.
they don't own what's in the trust, but they control it. They might as well be their money. We don't have our trust. And so, we don't have access to the funds. So, if we were to eliminate the need for money and all live richly, essentially we would have access to our wealth, our rightful wealth.
Interesting,
So,
because yeah, they're the powers that be are manipulating a situation now where we're not owning anything. Like you buy a movie or a video game and you
yep,
don't actually own it. You just are renting it, basically,
yep,
renting access to it. And
own nothing. I don't think
yeah,
people
it's
will
it's
be all that
disturbing.
happy.
No, it's disturbing because I remember as a kid, going to the game store and buying a disc, and that's your game, and you can loan it to a friend if you want, and that those
Yes.
days are gone.
Yeah, I remember, in fact, I wish, I don't know what happened, but I had my Adobe Creative Suite 3, and I used it for many years, and it was mine, and it
Yeah.
suddenly stopped working, and I don't know whether
Oh,
that's because they messed with things or what,
they
but
added a
now
subscription to it. I
but
don't know
now
which
you
version, but
sub
yeah.
now you subscribe to get access to Photoshop, which just
Yeah, I
annoys
was
me.
really upset about that when I found that out too. It's like everything is a
Yeah.
subscription. You don't like software. It's very frustrating.
Indeed. Indeed. Let me see. I'm trying to find, I had another, oh, I know what I called it. You get to the point where you forget what you called all your articles when you thought
Yeah, no, I
you
I, I
did
get
all
that. I
of them.
totally do.
Okay, there we go. It's called You Are a Multimillionaire, and I also give more more data on those trusts that we are kept from. And I'll drop that in here. There you go. Anyway,
Okay.
yeah, I'm so adamant about getting rid of money because it is our bane. Humanity's bane is money. It promotes psychopaths to the top because, unlike most of us, I mean, most of us won't kill for money. We won't lie, dupe people for money. We won't steal and sabotage for money. But psychopaths will. And if they think they can get away with it, they will do it. And eventually, you wind up with psychopaths at the top. And I don't think we can say there's no evidence that the people at the top are not psychopaths.
No, there's tons of evidence, and that's honestly, I think that's kind of like a little bit of their downfall is, everything is so exposed now. You can't really hide anything because everything is on the internet, and if you try to lie about something, people could just go back in history using the Wayback Machine and find videos of you contradicting yourself. So it's come to be a point where that
Well,
showmanship, they really have to be consistent with what they're saying, or else people can spot it now real easy.
I think that they're working on making it so we can't do that. You know, there have been things, and I forget offhand what they were that I remember very clearly back in the day encountering that when you do a search now, nothing, absolutely nothing, and it's like, hmm.
You
And
look
in
at the
fact,
algorithm as well, it doesn't do any favors to these fringe topics. It
no,
really, it's
no,
reactionary content that it puts to the top, and people, channels like ours, who are trying to open source free energy technology, it just gets left in the dust.
yeah. Speaking of that, I did a duck duck search for the Montauk project, which I haven't touched on quite yet.
Oh, that's
But
right.
it,
You did
but
have
the
okay, I'm sorry.
Montauk project is a conspiracy theory.
Yes, I
Suggesting
know
that
I know just the basics about it, but if you want to go into that, that's a fascinating
okay. Well, I will
area.
be honest with you. I don't know the details about the project itself, but I do know that I am a Montauk project reject. And this
How did you find
basically,
that out?
well, I have memories. That's how I found it out. I started retaining memories at the day I learned to walk. I mean, that was my first memory, and from that point on, I remember a fair amount. And that was just past the age of 1, like within weeks after I turned 1. And so I've got a lot of memories, and yes, some of them are repressed, mainly from the man who married my mother's sister and his stuff. I'm sorry, I gotta watch my language. Uh,
Oh no, it's okay.
okay. Anyway, uh, but basically, one day, we were living in San Diego, which is where I was born. I said, and then we moved out just past my second birthday, to Long Island, and uh, my dad was working on something out here. I don't know where or what. I was way too young at that age. Um, but he one day he and my mom and my sister, who by that, she was an infant when we moved out here, but it was about a year later, give or take. We we she was left with a lady babysit. And my mom and dad and I drove out to the east end of the island. And we stopped. I don't know if you've seen pictures of those sand dune mountainy, things that are on the beach on the southern shore, but I remembered them very clearly. And in my article, Montauk Project Reject, which I have listed way at the top of the chat there, I have an image of some of them. Anyway, Dad left Mom and me there and went somewhere. And I started building a sandcastle, and this lady from a house nearby came out and started talking with my mom. And then my dad came back, and my mom said, she's invited me to her house, and I'll be there. We're going to have some coffee and chit chat. And then they said, Amy, you go with Dad. And I went, okay. And Mom said he's got something special for you. And so I kept asking my dad as we walked to the car and got in and drove along, what special thing? And he kept saying, you'll see, you'll see. And then we get to the point where I can see the lighthouse, right? And I said, I'm thinking, oh, goody, we're going to go to the lighthouse and we'll go to the top and I can look out. And, so I said, is that where we're going? And Dad's like, not quite. And we pull in to the side road and there's a gate there. And through the gate, I can see this almost rectangular thing, not quite, and it's actually kind of curved, and it had things sticking out. It turns out, you know, later on I learned, that it was the radar dish, but I didn't know what it was, and I'm fascinated by that. And Dad talks to the guy at the gate there, and they open the gate, and we go in, and we park and go to this building that the radar dish is above, and he says something to the guards at the gate, and I know at the door, and they open it up, and we go in, and I can describe the room we were in just fanatical detail because I happen to be a spatial. Well, I don't like to use the term genius, but all my memories are exceedingly spatial, and I did test as a spatial genius. Anyway, so we go in, and there's a guy at a desk, and he tells us to sit for a few moments, and then he calls me up to the desk and starts asking questions that I don't really remember. And then he tells me to go with the guys who are standing at these double doors that were opposite the doors we came in. And I turned to Dad and said, please come with me. And Dad's like, I'll be waiting for you, but I can't go with you. You have to go alone. And I'm crying. And they take me by one guy takes me by a hand, and then the other guy reaches out and takes the other. And we go through those doors. And there's this brightly lit corridor with, fluorescent lights. And then my memory stops. And the next thing I remember is I'm being led back out by the two guys had my arms, and I'm sobbing because I know I failed. I don't know what I failed. I just know I failed. And there's another guy that's walking with us too. And we get to the doors that we entered, and there's my dad out in that room that we'd come into. And I'm sobbing and sobbing and I'm dad and they started talking to dad while he was kind of holding, with one arm holding me against his leg as I'm sobbing away. And then we went out and back to the car. And as we're getting in, I said to dad, I'm sorry I failed. And what he said to me has stuck with me ever since. He said, that's okay, honey. that means you get to stay with us.
Wow.
And I'm and
That's
I'm
that's a
like,
lot to take in.
yeah, yeah. And all I have as far as what I think might be a memory from that experience, and I can't say for sure. It may be completely imagination. It may be from some other situation I was in that I don't remember. I mean, I have no idea. But it seems to me that I was put into a chair, kind of like a dentist's chair, sort of an arrangement, you know?
Right, similar to what they would use for the MK Ultra test
It,
subjects.
okay. And I'm pretty sure I remember an ET kind of
Wow.
poking at,
So like a gray or
yes,
something like that?
yes, yes.
Wow. Like a tall gray or a short gray? Do you remember?
Well, it was kind of hard to tell. I'm sitting in the chair and all I could see was like waist up and, you know,
Right. Yeah. I was
I
just
don't know, but
that
big,
is
big
weird.
oval, almond shaped eyes. And,
That's got to be creepy.
and, and so
Wow.
I don't know. I just know that seems to be something that came from that time that I don't really have any memory of.
Well, I know you
And
said you weren't familiar with the official like theories and about the Montauk Project, and I
well,
really am not either.
I'm kind of I know that MK Ultra was involved with that to some extent.
Well,
And
I have a brief synopsis if you want me to read it, because some of
yeah, go
this
ahead.
I'm just glancing over, and it's kind of like you know giving a little bit of uh, um, validation to your story. So it says the Montauk Project is a conspiracy theory alleging secret U.S. government mind control and time travel experiments took place at Camp Hero in Montauk, New York during the 1970s and 80s. Proponents claim researchers worked on, amongst other things, psychological warfare, teleportation, and interdimensional travel, often cited by a 1992 book by Preston Nichols. So this is what I found interesting is because you mentioned a radar tower, and it
Yeah, well, I'll
says
tell you something. It started a lot earlier than what they're stating because when I was there, it was about 1960.
right because you said you were just a kid, so this had to have
No,
been.
I was never a baby goat. I was a child.
Oh, sorry, you were just a child. So that's interesting because a lot of times, obviously, like the official like theories get things wrong, and it's possible that this project could have started a lot earlier than the official narrative, which is
Oh, I'm
totally believable. So, but going back to your story, it says experiments allegedly occurred at the former Camp Hero Air Force Station, which featured a large Cold War era radar tower,
Yep.
and I was like, wow, she's talking about a radar tower, and it says claims include experiments in mind control, the Montauk chair for manipulating time, and the creation of spatial anomalies. So I'm like, wow.
Yeah, I don't know how much of that was real, but I will say this much. I think the reason that they rejected me is because unlike so many people who don't have any memories prior to like the age of 6, I was already collecting memories. And I think I think they went, no, we can't, we need somebody who isn't there yet. And that's why I was
Oh, so they
rejected.
needed kind of like a somebody who was,
Ta-
I hate to say like an empty vessel, but somebody who
tabula
was
rasa.
more influenced,
Yeah,
more easily. Yeah.
influenceable.
Right.
Exactly. But I already
Interesting.
had a sense of self. I mean, I knew who I was, and I think they felt that that was not of use to them, and that's why they kicked me out and said, "Nope, she's not gonna be here." So,
Interesting. No, this is these are all like very disturbing insights,
hmm
and very traumatic experiences that that you went through. I can't imagine like that must have been terrifying. So
well,
um
to me, it wasn't because, I mean, it was terrifying to leave my dad with strangers, but I never, just it was more, I failed. I didn't know why at
oh,
the
so you were
time.
just more concerned that you failed whatever test they were giving you,
Right.
and they
That
kind of
that I
they
that I
probably
that
built it
I
up in your head that it was
disappointed
important
my
and stuff.
father. Yep.
Wow.
So, yeah. But yeah, the whole thing wasn't all that traumatic for me. It may have been traumatic if I had any memories that were clear. Like I said, that ET thing was just a flash. It wasn't like I remember any movement much. I mean,
Oh,
I could tell,
I totally
it's just a
understand
flash.
with repressed memories. Sometimes you do get details that are just like a screenshot, and you just don't get any more information than that. And I
Yeah, it was.
understand that's just the way it goes with some of those
Yep.
memories.
So, but again, like I said, I don't even know for sure that that was a memory. I'm
Oh,
pretty
maybe it was like something that they implanted or suggested
No,
with
no, I don't think
uh,
it was
no.
that. I I don't know whether I made it up to try to explain what happened, or but my gut says that that's an actual memory. That there was an ET that was examining me and decided I was not what they wanted.
And to this day, you have no idea what the test was or what they were trying to do, huh?
Nope, no memory. Like I said, my memory just blanks out as we're just past the doors as we're walking down the hall, and then comes back as we're walking back towards those doors to where my father was. That, and me knowing that all I remember is knowing that I had failed. What I failed, I don't know. How I failed, I don't know. But I was told I failed and I had to go back. And that's that's all I had.
Wow.
So yeah, it was I've had a very interesting life, I think.
I
And
would say
yeah,
so. I would definitely say so.
and I'm very targeted. I uh, you don't, I used to apply for jobs when I was younger, and I was almost always offered the job. I mean, yeah, okay, occasionally, there somebody else would get the job. But I had no problems getting jobs. And then after the job that I worked on a marine base as a civilian, and it was after that job that all of a sudden, I mean, I spent over a decade applying for jobs. And I mean applying for jobs. I calculated that I applied to at least 120,000 jobs over that decade. You know,
Wow.
Monster made it pretty easy. And I actually got a lot of offers. You know, they'd say, "Yeah, okay, we'll get in touch with you, tell you when to start, where to go, and I'll get all the details," and then never hear from them again. And I'd email them, and I'd call and leave messages, and they'd never get back to me. It was like, nope, nothing. And I'm sorry, I can't buy that I'm just that bad that everybody would. I mean, why would they offer me the job in the first place if they thought I was so
Right.
bad?
Well, I mean, I hate to say it, but if somebody was really in one of those programs as a child, they're not just going to stop tracking them. You know, like they're going to keep tabs on them in some way.
Well,
Um,
yeah, but I think that it had more to do with the fact that I brought up my knowledge of electrogravitics at the job, which may have been not
yeah,
the best
those are
idea,
they
but
don't like that. They
I was
don't
a
like
pretty
it.
I was a pretty naive young lady at the time, I mean, not all that
Well,
young,
it's an
but,
understandable mistake. I mean, when I
you
first
know,
got into this
and
stuff, I didn't know
yeah,
that.
I think that, somebody went, handle her. Because it was after
Yeah,
that job,
I
and I was
mean,
making back then, I was making $60,000 a year, which would be closer to $120,000 today. Uh, you know, I was doing quite well, and, uh, suddenly I couldn't get a job, and I wound up getting one job only because I had applied to a temp agency, uh, that wasn't really for graphic designers, so they just tucked me away. And a number of years later, they had a penny saver that wanted a graphic designer and editor, and they went through their records and went, "Oh, here's somebody," and they sent me out. It was all local, so it wasn't like anything went over the net really, and so they didn't really know, and so I got that job quite easily. And then somebody bought out the penny saver. They shut it down and moved all the work out of state, and I was out of a job, and I haven't had a job since.
wow. Well, uh, I'm sorry to hear that. That is
And
very unfortunate. I know, specifically, it's not just you struggling though. There are a lot of people struggling.
oh yeah,
So
I
I
know.
think I know they're not in the same situation, but I think there's a little comfort in knowing that it's like our decisions as individuals aren't really putting us in this place. It's people outside of our ability to affect.
Exactly.
So
Yep.
the powers that be are putting us in these terrible economic places, and we do our best. We do our best.
Yep. We do what we can.
But it's getting close to the 8 o'clock mark. I'm gonna close it up here in a few minutes. If there's anything else that
Okay.
you'd like to discuss briefly, or if you'd like to
I
give
I
any kind of
I think I've managed to cover all of the exciting things that have gone on in my life.
yeah, we've actually covered a very wide array of topics this evening, and everything from free energy and anti-gravitics to occult rituals and subcultures thereafter. So
Yeah.
I think we've had a very productive discussion. I just want to thank you so much
Oh,
for
well,
coming
thank
on and
you.
being brave and exposing some of the underbellies of the culture that we live in. So it's very very brave of you to come on here and discuss some of your experiences.
Well, you know, I'm determined to get information out there, and I mean, the links I gave you are to just one platform I post my articles at. I mainly focus on Odyssey, but I'm on Substack, I'm on Minds, I'm on Hive, and I'm on Blurt, and I
Okay.
publish
I
out
know.
to
I
all of
just switched to Hive as well, so I've been using Hive to upload some of my videos and documentaries and stuff like that. So I'll probably get in touch with you and see if I can follow you there.
Okay, great. Yeah, because I'm not hard to find if you know how to spell Amaterasu Solar. Because that's where I'm at everywhere.
I'll do my best. But yeah, I just want to thank you again for coming on here, and everybody in chat. Everybody in chat's been very supportive. John Gray and Mike tuning in this evening, Astroplex and Turbo Splice. I really appreciate you guys for tuning in and sharing this evening with us. We are going to be, if I get an invite from Mike from Faraday Research, I am going to be doing a live stream in about an hour. We usually do that on Fridays at 9 o'clock. Free Energy Fridays, where us inventors get together and discuss our, research and, just have a good time. So if you guys are interested in that, we'll be doing that in about an hour, usually on Fridays. I haven't gotten an invite yet, but
I'm probably going to be in bed by that time. I'm being an old lady, and, I'm up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and this is actually pushing my bedtime.
No, that's understandable. And for my audience as well here in the Eastern Standard Time Zone, he is actually in a different time zone. He's in Canada, so he's not as late as I think he starts at like 6 his time. So it's a little bit earlier for him. For us, it's going to be a little bit later. Sometimes I don't make it the whole time, but I just wanted to inform you and the audience that we will be continuing live streaming tonight, picking up in about an hour. I think our usual time is about 9 p.m. So again, I want to thank you so much for stopping by, and I hope you find yourself in a better situation soon, and keep in touch.
My pleasure. And yeah, I sub to your channel, but I rarely come to you, Toilet.
No, it's okay. I'm in the process, like I said, of uploading my stuff to Hive, and I want to switch platforms. Not take anything off of YouTube, but maybe like multi-stream and in different platforms. And
I highly recommend Odyssey.
Odyssey, yeah, I'll look into Odyssey, and it's just some places got to give me a fair shake. Regarding getting this information out there, but it is what it is for now. We do our best, and with that, right. I'll see you next time. Have a good night.
Absolutely, good night, and thanks again.
In the depths of hidden files, trapped inside the secret circuits, unraveling through the miles. Oh, truth was masked by coded curtains. You didn't know, we're shattering the silence. Feel the power. Revelations on the rise. From the shadows, light emerges, breaking through the veils of dark. 0 points and gravity converge, yeah. Guiding voices, revelation start. Ancient whispers call, they're begging us to open our eyes. We stand tall, defying all their lies. Even in now, we're shattering the silence. Feel the power. Revelations on the rise. Forbidden knowledge we dare to see, unveiling secrets, setting us free. In this epic, we play our part with fierce hearts. In and now, we're shattering the silence. Feel the power. Revelations on the